And global affairs analyst Michael Bociurkiw is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and a former spokesperson for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Thank you so much for joining us here again. So you're in Kyiv, as if on cue right after Trump's win, there were all those drone attacks in your city. I just want to play the early morning sound that you sent us from where you were. Here it is. So with Trump's victory, what is the mood there in Ukraine?
Sure, good to be with you, Kim. Well, yeah, those chilling sounds are very reflective of how a lot of Ukrainians feel right now. They're scared, they're anxious, and if there was any hope that peace would miraculously emerge after the announcement of Donald Trump becoming president again, well, that has vanished. In fact, I think it's becoming more violent. Many injured and dead across Ukraine in the past few hours, and we're under an alert right now. So most of the Ukrainians I've spoken to over the past weeks have basically shrugged their shoulders when I ask them, what do you think? Is Biden or Trump better for Ukraine? I think what they feel is that unless Mr. Putin is pushed back, unless there's a huge show of strength to stop his territorial adventurism, nothing much is going to change here.
Yeah, it seems maybe surprising given all that Trump has said about cutting aid as well as his pro-Kremlin attitudes. But we've been told many in Ukraine actually welcomed Trump winning. Why might that be?
Well, I think they remember that Mr. Trump, who followed Mr. Obama into the White House, was the one who approved Javelin missiles to Ukraine, and that made a big difference at the start of the war. And also he imposed sanctions on Russia. So that eventually followed with the Biden administration drip feed approach of aid to Ukraine. But I think what you're seeing right now, for example, European leaders are meeting in Budapest right now. Mr. Zelensky is there. The European leaders huddling and saying, we have to be prepared to defend Ukraine ourselves. We have to step up our defense production, source from others. But all the signals point to the United States not wanting to be the main supporter of Ukraine or the world's policeman, for that matter.
All right. So as we heard in that report, Trump has boasted about getting a deal done in 24 hours. Obviously, Moscow poured cold water on that idea. But what do you expect Trump to do to try to get a deal done? What might it involve, and how much leverage might he have on Ukraine to force them to accept a deal that might be tilted perhaps in Russia's favor?
Yeah, if it goes the way J.D. Vance has described it, where Russia gets to hold on to territory it's already seized, a demilitarized zone, and Ukraine not going into NATO, that will never float here anywhere in Ukraine. I think a couple of things happening on the sidelines. As you know, Saudi Arabia is taking a much bigger role in the region, in the war in Ukraine. They're expected actually to hold a peace summit, the next peace summit in Saudi Arabia, for the first time with Russia and China and Ukraine there. So that could yield results whatever happens in Washington. The other, Kim, the other thing that gives me a bit of hope is, believe it or not, there is still a few grown-ups left in the room that Mr. Trump could tap. And I'm thinking of people like Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, former Secretary of State, former U.S. ambassador to NATO under George W. Kurt Volker, and Richard Grenell, former U.S. ambassador to Germany and a former Fox News contributor. So if you have people like that advising him, maybe it'll bring a sense of sobriety, and that, you know, they will hopefully convince him that if Mr. Putin is not pushed back, he will go further into Europe, it will become more expensive, and eventually that will trickle down to the pocketbooks of average Americans.
Yeah, we'll see with those appointments. Certainly, Trump prizes loyalty above perhaps being challenged or hearing opposing viewpoints. But turning to Russia, Putin has said that Trump's win could hail, in his words, a new world order and could mean the end of unipolarity. Presumably, he's celebrating the win. So specifically, what could it mean, do you think, for his war on Ukraine?
Yeah, well, I think in the wider picture, what we're seeing is an axis of autocrats really forming, increasing, solidifying. Autocrats meaning in Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. I think, however, is China is the senior partner in the room. We saw that, for example, at the BRICS summit, calling the shots this year and last year. And I do think that if Chinese pragmatism is allowed to enter into this story, they're very, very keen to tap Ukrainian natural resources to resume trade with Ukraine. And they do have a lot of sway over Mr. Putin. I have always said, if Mr. Xi Jinping called Mr. Putin today or tomorrow and said, end the war in Ukraine, it will happen. So hopefully with the geopolitical kind of landscape shifting right now, it's not only going to be to a Mr. Trump to decide what goes on, but Trump, again, has to show that America is strong, because blurred lines are the worst thing that you could present to a dictator when it comes to Putin in Ukraine or Xi Jinping in Taiwan.
Yeah, we'll end on that note. Always appreciate getting your analysis. Michael Bociurkiw, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.